Welcome, Colin. It's a huge pleasure to meet a little page. It is for me, especially, it's a huge pleasure to talk with you about Encenathrakh, this new album, and more things related to the metal world. So, starting with this question, how has you been during these crazy times in the world? First 2 years pandemic, a war in Europe now. Who knows what the next couple of years? Alien invasion, zombie apocalypse, the machines takes the power. Who knows what happened? Really, so we are crazy. We are living in a no world now.
Yeah, tell me about it. Yeah, just like everybody else, it's been a really unexpectedly strange, intense time. You know, all the stuff that you just mentioned. And speaking of the epidemic, I managed to make it through the entire thing, being super careful. You know, closed the studio for a year. Reopened and then it seemed like everything was okay, and then started having everyone wear masks. And anyway, 2 years later, I finally catch COVID after having avoided it for that long. So I totally convinced myself that I'd beaten it, and I was like, no, I'm not going to get it. And then of course that's when it hit me. So I've just been getting over that the last 2 weeks. But feeling a lot better now. But man, it's like even getting the mild case of it's not so mild, like just in terms of the long recovery, and just feeling like just had no energy for the past 2 weeks.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, aside from all the challenges that placed in 2020 and 2021, and then just getting sick recently. One of the coolest, well, definitely the positive outcome of this whole thing, and a good outcome of me having to close the studio for a year, was this huge spur of creativity that I've had for just working on my own music and having more time to work on my own projects instead of almost always spending just such a large amount of my time working on other people's records.
Mm-hmm.
So, Encenathrakh and all the other bands and solo projects that I've been doing over the last 2 years have, like, all of my projects have kind of kicked into a higher gear of making albums and releasing stuff. Definitely not in terms of playing live. That's all been on hold. But in terms of actually making music and starting new projects and stuff, it's been kind of like the most condensed period of creativity like that I've ever had. So that's been like a really interesting positive aspect to all the negative shit that's been going on.
Nice to hear that. Yeah, I hear a lot of your productions as a producer, mastering and mixing across the world. I hear bands from Nepal, Japan. I hear last year from the United Kingdom, one band. I hear the last After Vidal from you. I found the new album from Discordia with you. So yes. You are a really, you're a gifted guy with your sound.
Oh, thank you, man.
Your talented. You're just very amazing for me. So now I'm returning to the Encenathrakh. So yeah, one aspect, and I'm talking about especially about the name. What is the exact meaning of Encenathrakh, and why did you select this name? Because it's a peculiar one. I try to find, well, as always, as a musician fan, I try to look at I try to search and look Google and whatever searcher, and no one told me what the hell means this Encenathrakh.
What the meaning is, right?
Yes.
Well, there's the reason for that is that there is no meaning. That's a word of Mick, or we should call him Rick, since it's the Encenathrakh interview. The other guitar player, that's one of his words, and he's just has a long history of constructing words, making up words for the names of his project. So he's had Cromtech, Orthrealm, Octus, Acrolim, Kralis. Those are all made up words of his. So Encenathrakh's just another one from the library of Mikbar words.
Okay. So when I hear the first time Encenathrakh, or especially the first album, the music was brutal. Oh, bueno, and crazy, and your idea, it continues to this new album. Who came up with the idea to do some stuff more brutal than usual bands with the brutal death metal, technical death metal? And what do you think about the label or the label or the tag? The many reviewers said that Encenathrakh plays technical brutal death metal according to the fans and reviewers. So, cause for me, when I hear this, is not technical, it's more noise, more abstract, more brutal. It's just extreme music. Technical in some way, but it's for more punch in the face. If you're not related with the brutal style, perhaps. But if you have experience, like the first example for this sound is Dripping, the only album from Dripping, this kind of experimental,
absolutely.
this kind of stuff. And when I hear that, and I try to relate the sounds Encenathrakh. So for you, what is exactly the label or style that Encenathrakh plays?
Well, okay, so it's interesting that you say that, and that it has the technical label, but it is more noise based, and that would seem to be sort of antithetical to technical, which would be sort of very intricate and worked out. But I think honestly both apply just fine, because I think that's sort of the area that the band exists in. Is it's sort of both noise and pure chaos and pure nonsense, but it's also kind of the most hyper technical brutal death metal that you could have. And I mean, it's not like we sat down and talked about what we wanted to do with the band. We just started the band and we all kind of knew what it would sound like. It just happened that way. But I think that subconsciously that was definitely in mind, was that we were all really interested in where those two things that would seem to be opposites meet, where you can have something that is the most chaotic, unpredictable music ever, non-repeating music ever, but is also sort of the most intricate and detailed music at the same time. So pure meathead noise on the one hand, and super Baroque, worked out, sort of classically influenced hyper composition on the other hand. And another way you could look at it is that the most hyper composed music and the most kind of like raging free improvisation can often kind of sound the same.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a really interesting fact. And I'm a big fan of like avant-garde classical music, like 20th century and 21st century classical music, which is sort of the most hyper worked out, planned out, preconceived, intentional music you can think of, where like every single detail and inflection of the way the music is played is notated. And a lot of that music, it's so kind of fractured and abstract that if you didn't know it was composed and you just heard it, it might be hard to tell if it was somebody just making it up on the spot or if it was a super detailed composed piece. And maybe a good example of that, I think it was my friend Tom Blankart that pointed this out. He's a jazz bass player, free improviser, kind of avant-garde musician, really cool. And he was talking about how there's this 20th century composer, Brian Fernio, who writes kind of the most overly complicated classical music you can think of. Like if you think to do it later, look up some of his scores on YouTube, and you can kind of like see what they look like and hear what they sound like at the same time. And it's like, it's comedy. It's hilarious. The music looks so ridiculous. Like, how could you ever read this music? It's unreadable. And I think part of almost his style was forcing musicians to play this unplayable music. But Tom was making the point that a solo bass composition of Brian Fernio kind of sounded almost indistinguishable to the free improvisation of this jazz bass player, Barry Guy. And it's kind of a cool comparison when you look at the most extreme sort of free jazz, free improvisation music, and the most hyper composed modern classical, they can end up being almost indistinguishable. It's almost like you have these two extremes of music, and you go so far out from each other that they loop back around and they're the same. So that's a little bit where we're coming from with Encenathrakh, I think, even though it wasn't necessarily said or like a mission statement. It's sort of what the band ended up being.
Oh, whoa, a lot of backgrounds into there.
Yeah.
Okay. So now talking about the names, because I'm so curious. I'm really curious about the names. Talking about the names of the album, especially with the second and third one, Trakeate y Traikaga, the very difficult one pronunciation, and the third one is Itaetring Osiate. What doesn't I try to pronounce as well? So I tried to find information about these names as usually translated into Google and more things as a fan of the band. And I could find anything when I tried to read the lyrics of the first album and the second album. And so here, reading seeing the booklet and the CD, and nothing came. So it's nothing came. So for that, what are these words mean? Because it's sometimes we have related, because the name Encenathrakh, Trakeatreach, Aguichihuaca, this kind of stuff.
You notice the similarity in there.
Yes, a lot of similarities. Sometimes I try to relate with the sci-fi movie language, the Star Trek Klingon, like something like that.
Nice. I hadn't thought of that, but that's good.
Or perhaps when you have a small brother and you create a special language to communicate, it's just the two brothers understand. No one else understands. So.
Yeah. So that not far from all those things, but not exactly any one of them. So I'm trying to remember, because this is like, it's crazy to think about this, but this band has now existed for almost 10 years. It seems ridiculous to me. But back when we did the first album in 2013, I think what I did was I took the name Encenathrakh, and I found some website that I've never been able to find since that was some sort of like auto word generator or something, where you could sort of plug words in and it would give you different combinations of the syllables out. And I think I used that to make all the song titles for the first album. I used Encenathrakh, and maybe I put in like 2 or 3 other syllables, like Keth and Gornth or something like that. And so all those titles were made out of that, I think. And then after that, since I couldn't ever find that website again, I sort of started doing it manually for all the other titles. So what I did was I took all the titles from the first album and I separated them into all their component syllables, and I made a list of all the syllables. Whoa. And then I constructed new words from that bank of syllables. And then I think for the second album, I started doing 2-word titles. So now that was kind of in play. And I've just been using the same bank of syllables ever since. That's kind of those kind of became like the building blocks of the language. So like you were saying about like the made up language between brothers, it has that aspect to it. Or like Klingon, and then it's another, like, it's a made up language developed from a made up word.
Oh, wow. Okay. So another detail about the music from Encenathrakh is the cover arts did it by the Raymond Wethorn, where he puts corpses, tangled bones, body remains, and nightmares for the end of the world. And for this one, in Itate Trok Isiate, he added a pyramid into the idea. So for that, do you let him create the art as a visceral like that? Or do you send some sketches to present just a noisy cover?
we don't send him sketches, and I think so yeah, he just does it. But for the first album cover, we didn't give him any direction at all. He just came up with that out of nowhere. And then I want to say that the 2-song promo cover, which is a little bit more of like a wall, that one I think he might have even have made prior. That might have even been pre-existing, because I seem to remember emailing him and being like, hey, we got another thing, like, do you have something just laying around? So I want to say that was the case. But for the second album and the new one, we did actually give him the idea, the basic idea. The second album was the sea floor of crabs.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that, and then for the new one, I think it was just the idea of the pyramid. So I mean, very, very basic ideas that we give him. And I think for the one that he's working on now for our next album, we gave him some weirder and more specific ideas. But for the second and third album cover, it was very straightforward. It was just, yeah. See, I think actually maybe even for the second one, there was a photo that I sent him that was the crabs on the seabed. I might be making up that might be a false memory, but I want to say it was like a screenshot I took of a video that I was watching about, like, you know, undersea life or something.
Right.
And that was kind of the inspiration. But for the new one, I think we just said pyramid.
Oh, okay. So,
but just,
about,
you know, just kind of like the idea of, in the past, all the covers have been almost completely uniform. And so I think we thought it would be a cool idea for Ray to do his thing that he always does, but to have like a sort of a strong compositional form or something for this one, instead of something that was like a little bit more homogeneous.
Oh, okay. So when, as you said, no, usually when a person hears the music from Encenathrakh in all album set, this music has no form in it, and most people rejected the music for this kind of madness. Especially, I love it because I love this abstract music in many ways. So because they are used to hearing things with choruses, catchy riffs, and more things. As you remember, the brutal metal stuff, the brutal death metal stuff from the 90s, like Suffocation, Broken Hope, then the second wave with Deeds of Flesh, Dix Burgers, has a very patterns that are all people understand that. It's very
catchy.
Yeah,
it's like music you can sing, you know.
Yes,
sing
yes,
the riffs.
yes. Yeah, and the guitar is very talented and that way. But with Encenathrakh, you don't have these aspects, and bring us just chaotic noise and psychedelic music in some way. But I feel psychedelic in some way. So how was this project born that way? Which influence do you have to mix a lot of madness on it? Because it's difficult to label, as I said in the previous question, but at the same time, it's like a train that no one stops. Since the first second to the last seconds, a train that no one stops.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
It's very amazing music.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, you have it exactly right, I think, already, in just the way you asked the question, which is that we have, I think, you know, all of us in our own way, we have a lot of appreciation for every stage of brutal death metal, from the earliest stages with Suffocation, and, you know, through the Deeds of Flesh stuff. And then we all have an affinity, I think, for just the most ridiculous, over the top, almost unmusical, you know, like Bound and Gagged is a weird example, because their music seems very sort of juvenile and noisy and over the top, but actually it's very sort of like well-written music. And they're sort of like overqualified. So that's kind of a weird example, but I guess I'm talking more like the Enmities of the world, and the Indonesian scene, and
Enmity.
the Thai you know, Ecchymosis and like all those bands and stuff. Like that world of brutal death metal where the music is sort of bursting at the seams so much in terms of it being just an over-the-top sonic, enveloping, constant experience, that at that point the more like rock basis to the music, the more heavy metal aspect of it is just kind of getting whittled away or sort of buried under all this noise. So it's like that's a lot of the stuff that we love too. And I think just the idea of us getting together and doing our version of that and just making it as over the top as possible was maybe part of where we were coming at it subconsciously. It's interesting. It's like I don't remember really talking about the band. There was a sort of precedent which had Mick and Weasel in it, and with a bass player and our friend Eston Brown on vocals, who is he's in Vulnificus now is his current band, and Abolishing the Ignominious, but he used to be in Animals Killing People from New York. He sang for them for a while, and his band was Humanity Falls here, and that's when we met him. That was the band he was singing in. But great brutal death metal singer. So they did just one gig and never recorded anything, but it was a fully improvised sort of extreme metal band. So Mick and Weasel had already done something that was close to what Encenathrakh would be doing. And I think that kind of, it gave, you know, partially gave me the idea, and maybe them too. I was like, okay, I have a sound in mind, and Mick and Weasel would be perfect for it. And the singer who would be perfect for it is Paulo. Because I mean, Eston's a great singer, one of my favorites, but Paulo has this amazing ability to improvise. And he's got just a really insane few vocal techniques that he does, which kind of like go outside of what's kind of reasonable in a more normal death metal context.
Yeah.
So I think just the idea to get the four of us to make kind of the most extreme brutal death record we could do was, you know, that was kind of the part of the impetus too. So us being a fan of all this music, but then also realizing that all four of us musically, I think, could combine to make a particularly, you know, maybe interesting version of that yeah, you know, extreme end of brutal death.
Yeah, one comment in your live presentation, and I saw in YouTube, one comment that captured my attention is the Paulo Henry. Someone said that he used the technique beatboxing.
Oh yeah.
That's why, and I hear that there's beatboxing, a good old stuff, but beatboxing is very.
Yeah, I think he was doing more of that at the show that we played. And it's interesting. Paulo's, he's got so many different vocal styles, but also it's interesting, just like on each time that we record with him, he sort of has a new sound each time, and he sings very differently when we've played live and when we've recorded live, where we're like all playing at the same time, versus the times where he's been, you know, overdubbing, or like on the new album he actually recorded first, so we overdubbed on top of the vocals. So he gets different results, I think, depending on the context a lot. And so when we're playing live, his vocals are like a lot more kind of aggressive and fast rhythmically. And then I think when he's overdubbing, it tends to be more of the really guttural, like long tone kinds of shit.
Okay.
But yeah, no, I know what you're talking about. I know what you're talking about the beatboxing. I feel like he hasn't done as much of that on the records, but I totally remember that from the show.
Yeah. Well, I read that comment, and I think like this. So yeah. In that video, he's doing beatboxing. But that's amazing at that moment.
And I think I want to say the stuff that sounds like beatboxing is probably one of the inhale styles that he does on the new album. The the left speaker is all exhales and the right speaker is all inhales. And then there's a center vocal too, but it's kind of like low in the mix and more like a bass player would be. So there's sort of like rhythm guitar vocals and bass vocals.
Wow, amazing. So
yeah, speaking of Paulo, that's one really cool thing about the new album is that he in a sense wrote it because he was the first person to record. So everything is based off of his vocal patterns on the new album, whereas in the past it was always like guitar and drum, the way like most bands record, where the drums and guitars are recorded and or just the drums, but we always would play together. On the second album, we like redid the guitars, but on the first album, it's all live. And on the 2 EPs, it's actually all 4 of us playing live with the vocals too.
Okay. Now talking about one special song that I saw, I think this is the first song that you publish or that you upload in your in YouTube. That's the name. Que comienza con Encenathrakh. This is the first song that I saw on drums, and the detail that captured my attention was the mix drums with the acoustic snare, with the electronic toms, and all the time Whistle plays a crazy and abstract drummer. How many methods does he use to play each song in Encenathrakh? Or perhaps are just crazy drums with crazy music, because a lot of gravity, a lot of hammer, a lot of blast beats into there, for crazy, just crazy.
Wait, so I'm sorry, what was the question?
So how many methods does he use to play each song on Encenathrakh?
How many what?
Methods, drumming methods.
Like symbols, you mean?
No, drumming methods. So drum, like how many? So related with this, how many blast beats did he use for each record? Hammer, blast.
Like how many like different kinds of blast beat? Is that what you mean?
Yes,
like
yeah. Okay.
Yeah, good question. I've never really counted them. But yeah, I mean I think all of them.
and I think he creates more.
What's that?
I think he creates more because it's a lot
yeah,
more.
I mean, maybe he has some of his own. Yeah, I mean, dude, at this point, it kind of is mind-boggling how much development just the world of extreme metal drumming has undergone, where we have you can even ask a question like that. Like, you know, there's sort of like more different types of just blast beat than either one of us could probably think of. It's just so I always did you ever listen to the band from Brazil, Infested Blood? Yeah. There's the I like all their records, but especially the third one is Interplanetar Decimation. Oh, it's the red one, the one before the blue.
Okay.
Interplanetar Decimation, which I kind of didn't realize it at first, but after a while of listening to it, I realized every single beat on it is a blast beat. Like he never does something that's not like, he'll never go to a double bass groove or anything. Like the album after it has plenty of those beats, but on that one record, it's all different kinds of blast beats. And I think that was actually a little bit of inspiration in Encenathrakh, was that record, how it never does anything that's not the most extreme thing on the drum. You know, you never get like a recognizable slow part. And Encenathrakh is a little more variation than that, but I think it's a similar impulse to like use every kind of blast beat, but not really ever have like an actual slam or a breakdown. Like maybe the guitars get slow every now and then, but the drums are always fast.
Okay. Well, we are very close to this interview, Colin. And now we will focus on your projects as a musician and a producer. How does it feel to play bass with one of the main influences for technical death for these years, as Gorgus is it? Because now Gorgus is a great inspiration for Discordia, for Replicant, for I don't know how many bands they influence, or look like my
Yeah,
influence a lot
super
of bands. It's a lot.
Absolutely.
And how are the things going with the Menegot studio? Because each bizarre or madness music that I found during the last 5 or 10 years, always you are behind the desk recording, mixing, mastering this kind of music, and usually love it.
Oh, that's awesome, man. Yeah, I'm so glad to hear that. Yeah, I mean, for the Gorguts part, it just always been very surreal that happened to me and Kevin. Yeah, I mean, I had met Luke once before we joined, but it was definitely still a totally out of the blue offer to join the band and restart it. And for me, I mean, it was like Gorguts was not only one of my favorite, if not my favorite death metal band, but just one of my favorite bands, period.
Yeah.
I didn't hear them until pretty late. It wasn't until I think 2000 with From Wisdom to Hate that I heard them. And then I ended up hearing Obscura soon after, and then the early ones. But yeah, I guess, I mean, in between when I heard that record in like 2000 and joining the band in 2008, I mean, for those years, it was like a huge, definitely a band I listened to a ton, and also that made a huge influence on my own writing. Both Luke's contributions in writing and Big Steve's contributions, because they each kind of have their own voice, but and Dan Mongrain, who was on From Wisdom to Hate, and I was a big Martyr fan right around the same time that I got into Gorguts. Yeah, it was like all at once for me. It was Voivod, Gorguts, and Martyr and Cryptopsy, and yeah, all like right around the same time that I heard those bands and got into them. But Gorguts was my favorite of them and stuck the most. Voivod too, but they're kind of a different enough style that it's sort of like harder to rank them against each other. And Voivod influenced Gorguts so much, so it's like you have to look at that too. Anyway, I'm babbling, but it's a total honor. The stuff that we've worked on together, I'm really proud of, and I mean the only complaint that I ever have about the band is just that we don't do more stuff. But Luke has just a very different relationship with working on music to me and Kevin and a lot of the sort of people that I play with here in New York. It just sort of seems like here everybody's in 6 or 8 bands and is constantly doing music, and a lot of the people that I know just from other parts of the world and Canada and stuff, like just kind of work on stuff at a slower pace and sort of like put more into one project. And Luke's kind of has a thing with music where he's just like totally on, and he's just doing Gorguts for a bunch of years, and then he'll kind of put it aside for a bunch of years and not kind of think about it at all, and then come back to it, and he's full on again. So I'm sure it's just a matter of time, and we'll eventually jam again. But it's still been just an awesome experience. And then you asked about the studio, but yeah, was there something like that you wanted to know in particular, or?
Well, you have talking with this, one detail that I noticed in your production is the dark, dissonant, crazy, abstract, and I think demonic idea that you have in each record that you produce as a producer. So do you think these details are part of production style, or this is what the bands ask for? Because when I hear Artificial Brain, Japan, Imperial Triumph, Afterbeard, I don't remember the band from the United Kingdom, the last year, great album, by the way, the first album. Then I hear a lot of new Ivy Turn this year, a lot of us, and your touch is there. Your psycho touch, your psycho dissonant touch is there. So for you, which albums has your favorite into the death metal to achieve this sound by your own hands? Because I feel Gorguts, I feel Demolish in some ways, and this is the from Obscura and the Nesfiti from the Demolish.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So I think there's maybe two things going on, or maybe they're all sort of one and the same. But I mean, I've noticed that. Well, okay. Let me start by saying this: with the studio and recording world in general, people are always going to want to work with somebody or go to a studio based on other stuff that they've heard from it.
Yeah.
So that process steamrolls just the more stuff that you work on. And I think what happened is, like, right around soon after starting Behold the Octopus, that existed for a few years, and then joining Dysrhythmia, I started my recording studio in like 2004, my first one before moving here. And I think playing in those bands and playing a lot of shows back then ended up kind of being accidental advertising for the studio. And I would always record my own band stuff, not the first Dysrhythmia that I played on, but all the Octopus stuff and my other older bands and stuff. And then eventually Krallis and Gorguts, those started the same year. And then Encenathrakh a couple years later, and now I have all these other projects and stuff that I work on. So I think for the music that I was doing, that attracted some other, local bands and stuff that were maybe, kind of had something in common with the bands I was playing in. So some sort of like weird harmonic sense or kind of proggy rhythmic sense or something. So maybe somebody in one of those bands would hear one of my band's records and be like, oh, okay, Colin's bands are doing some shit that isn't that normal. Maybe and this sounds pretty good. Maybe he can work with my thing, which is a little bit not normal.
Yeah.
And do an okay job with it. And so then I work on that person's record, and then somebody else hears that person's record, and there you go. So the more people that hear the record, the more reach that has. So working on something like the Gorguts record, I'm sure was really good in terms of bringing in other bands that heard that stuff.
Yeah. So one aspect that I love to ask you is about how do you choose the music that you want to work on it, because sometimes the producers select this artist no, this artist yes, perhaps this one. How this come with this idea, which band is preferred for you, which sounds prefers for you, etc.
Well, I'm very flattered that you asked that question, because it's so far from the reality of running a studio. I take every job that is offered me. I don't select anything. It's all people writing to me. So that said, I feel super lucky to work on so much of the shit that's really cool, like a lot of which you mentioned. But other bands, like one of the records I just worked on is kind of like cool, interesting black metal band, Spirit Possession. That's a friend of mine, like a duo guitar and drummer. And that's like a band that I would reach out to and say like, hey, like I'd love to work with you, but I didn't even have to. Like luckily they happen to be friends of mine, and it made sense to work together anyway. So yeah, I mean the point is that I think a lot of these cool bands that I end up getting to work with, they end up coming to me sort of naturally because of the shit that I was talking about before about somebody hears one record that I worked on, and that gives them the idea to give me a call, and then maybe they have a good experience and we end up working together again. So I think that's more or less how I end up working with all the folks that you mentioned. And yeah, it's not because I'm seeking them out, but I'm super lucky to have them knocking at my door.
Oh, okay. Sometimes I think that you select because the bands or the bands like Crazy Sound, searching you. It's really
Yeah, well, no, it's funny that sometimes it's okay. I'm never annoyed when somebody contacts me to work on their record, because I'm just stoked that anybody wants to employ me to work on the audio stuff. Like, that's fucking awesome. But it sometimes it would just be nice for a change to work on something that was really straightforward. Because the hardest music to mix is the shit that I end up having to work on the most, which is the really intricate, technical, dissonant, dense, extreme metal. That's the hardest music to mix. So it's kind of a miracle that any of it sounds good, or in a way that other people think, like, agree sounds good, and then that leads them to end up contacting me to work on their stuff. So I really, really enjoy the records that I get to, even though I love working on all this really dense, crazy stuff from just the standpoint of an engineer and not as much a music fan, but a music fan too. But it's really nice when I do get to work on the stuff that's more traditional, like more like heavy metal or rock or acoustic music. Really what it is like music where there's more space in it, and when the instruments are a little more in their own element and are allowed to sound the way that they actually naturally sound in real life, those are the recordings that are the easiest to do and to mix. So anything that's more like simple, more rock-based, slower, more acoustic, those tend to be the easiest thing to mix. And the faster, the lower, the more distorted, the more constant everything is, which is describing, extreme metal, obviously, the harder it is to work on, because everything's sort of fighting for the same space. So yeah, it's cool on the one hand to work on all this awesome, really like adventurous music, but it is really challenging to work on a lot of the time. So in a sense, it's like kind of curses that's the music that I kind of wanted to make when I was younger, and that attracted these other bands that were like that. And now here I am 20 years later, sort of stuck working on all this super technical, dense stuff that happens to be really the hard to work on, like all the Imperial Triumphants and Clerics of the world. Like that music is the tallest order to mix, because it's just like already super dense music. And then they want to have 1,000 overdubs and guest musicians and all these extra textures and stuff. And so it's rewarding when you finally get to the end of a really dense project like that, and it sounds like anything, but it's man, it's a lot of work.
Also, you work with Piron. Piron is a very different band in the world today. I don't know if they play death metal, but according to them, is more than like more extreme metal, just extreme metal with
because it's not like in the box of just death metal or just grindcore. They're just doing more of their own thing. But I mean, of course, it's extreme rock music. We can say that for sure.
Okay. And what? No,
yeah, they're a good example of music that's kind of hard to record because it's just so full all the time, and so fast. And Steve hits so hard, but it's so fast, and the guitar is just this wall, but it's really intricate and dense. So yeah, that music is a challenge as well, for sure. But also, some of the sickest stuff. So it's fun and stressful to work on.
Okay. So now, as I said, we are very close. What are the future plans that the Encenathrakh has for this new album? Perhaps more gigs, perhaps. And for you, what are your future plans? Because I saw that Imperial Triumph said, or Zachary said, that the new album from Imperial Triumph is done and just waiting for the release with Century Media, this kind of stuff. So any advice or any announcement, especially for the new Imperial Triumph album? More projects are you working it? More weirder stuff, because your way of producing is weird and very abstract all the time. So these kind of things.
Yeah. So yeah, the Imperial Triumphant record we finished it in November, I think. So that's just got a longer delay to come out because they're with Century Media, so they're sort of subject to the delays of the usual label delays. But that's not even that delayed. That's just normal. I do all the self releases now, so the stuff just comes out instantly, and I get really addicted to that. So whenever I think about having to like wait 9 months for your record to come out, it just seems insane to me. But that's normal. But yeah, came out great. Another, we'll see what people think. We spent so long mixing it, not like time wise, but like a really condensed number of hours over like a week and a half. So it's pretty crazy. I don't even know what to think of it anymore, but I think it's pretty sick. Yeah, just did a session with Steve, the bass player, like a crazy big free jazz, so not really strictly free jazz, but free improvisation session here with like at one point we had four drummers in the same room and two saxophone players, and at one point there was like 3 guitars and bass and 2 drummers and 3 saxophones, or 2 saxophones and trumpet. So that was a fun session. Speaking of those are cool sessions too, like the improv sessions, like because we didn't really speak much of that. We're more talking about the metal sessions, but those are some of my favorites to work on because, with a metal record, you have the band that, they might rehearse and write the album for like 2 or 3 years and then record and spend like 2 weeks recording the album and then a week mixing it. And that's even not that crazy. People spend way longer. But with the free improv sessions, people come in, no preparation. They make a record or 2 records in like 2 hours. You maybe spend a day or 2 mixing it and it's done. And so it's so much sort of, it's such an efficient way to make music. And you can't get really the same results as when you write music. But see, that's the secret of Encenathrakh. We do get the same results. But yeah, so the free improv sessions are really fun from an engineering standpoint. Really exciting to just kind of like have everybody playing together and making stuff in the moment. So what else? Like just today, I've been sick, so I haven't been working for the past couple of weeks. But just today, I worked on the new. Do you know this band Cognizant from Texas?
No.
They're like I guess you would have to call them grindcore, but they're like as death metal as grindcore gets. So they still have super short songs. And I guess the riffing isn't fully death metal, but it just has like the not the more punk type of grind. It's definitely the more metallic grind. But it's Brian Fajardo on drums, who's in like sort of every grindcore band, Noisier, and what's the one with the discordant saxophone singer, Gridlink, who I'm leaving out like 70 bands. He's in like all of the grindcore bands. But yeah, I was just mastering their new album today, which is super sick, extreme metal stuff. I think Irving, the one guitar player, does all the recording and mixing in that band. So I was just doing the mastering. But
Great.
yeah, the Spirit Possession that I talked about, that's another really cool thing that I worked on. That probably won't be out for like another 6 or 7 months or something. Another thing that I worked on not too long ago that was one of my favorites was that band Antediluvian from Canada.
Oh, nice.
From Edmonton.
I spoke with Hasiopis.
Nice. Yeah, that was another one where I just did the mastering, but Tim, who plays guitar and sings in that band, is really like, he gives me these really cool mastering jobs to work on. His other band that he plays in is Black Death Cult, which I've done two records mastering for at this point. And he does this interesting thing where they'll mix the album sort of super dry and precise sounding, but then he leaves all the sort of dirtying up and even like adding reverb and stuff, he'll leave that to me to do in mastering, which is kind of atypical. Usually that's what you'll do in the mix, and then mastering is like a much more subtle process where you're just sort of like, you know, EQing it and compressing it a little bit, making it sound full, whatever you're doing. But he sort of, so he gives me sort of like more room to be creative in the mastering jobs. And so that Antediluvian was one where it's like, I got to actually kind of like put distortion and reverb and really sort of like shape it into this crazy sounding album. And I was just a big fan of it musically. So that was really fun to work on.
Yeah. I love 3 albums from them. It's very amazing, 3 albums.
Yeah, really. And all 3 of them sound pretty different from each other, which is,
yes.
Which is maybe more rare in their scene. I don't know, maybe that's an exaggeration, but that kind of like, you know, KV, bestial, death metal, I don't know what to call it. Like it's easy for everything to kind of sound the same, but I feel like their writing and riff style is actually like pretty different from album to album.
Yes,
and production too, but even just the writing, the way the music sounds is different. So props to those guys. Yeah.
Well, Colin, the sad times arrive at this interview. I hope you enjoyed this one as I did and really appreciate your time. For me, it's a huge honor to talk with you because I'm a huge fan from your work as a producer, as a mastering, as a mixing. I love all your works behind the desk. I love your work with Encenathrakh. I love your work with Gargoyles, with this kind of work you play with them. So, does anyone to add to something, or do you want to add something to your Latin American fans and Metallerium followers?
Well, yeah, first of all, Javier, thank you so much for having me, man. This is super cool to meet you and you know, talk about this bullshit. It's cool that anybody's interested, because, you know, Encenathrakh, of course, is going to be I think something that you either are really interested in or is totally unlistenable. So it's cool to meet somebody that appreciates it. And yeah, I mean, fuck, I would love to come play in Latin America again. The only time that I got to was a short tour with Gorguts in, I guess this was early 2017, where we were supposed to do a whole South American tour, but it ended up getting shaved down to just 2 Mexican shows, 1 Costa Rican show, and then 2 in Colombia. But we didn't get to make it to Peru or Brazil or Argentina or Chile, which was a big letdown. So yeah, maybe the Encenathrakh World Tour will come do a Latin American tour. That could be fucking sick. I think actually Paulo was, I mean, once again, not South America, but I think he was just in Mexico with Miasmatic Necrosis, the kind of gore grind band that he plays guitar in. So hey, anything's possible, you know?
Yeah, everything's happening.